ready to learn all about our pumpkin before we do any other experiments with it. So, like I said, I'm going to be using a little sugar pumpkin. These are actually pumpkins that you can use to make pumpkin pie. On the inside, we can use this type of pumpkin to make pumpkin pie. You can do it with all different pumpkins. So you can use the big pumpkins, you can use a little pumpkin. You could even use this as actually not a pumpkin, it's a squash, but you can use this and it would do a very similar thing. So I'm gonna be using this pumpkin. The other thing I need is all about my pumpkin page. You may have it. If you don't, that's okay. You can follow along. So what we're gonna be doing with our pumpkin is we kind of want to see, just like a real scientist, what do we notice about our pumpkin already? So before we do anything else, what do we see? What do we notice? You can feel it. You can squeeze it. Is it heavy? Is it light? How big do we think it is? So you can even tell compared to this pumpkin's much bigger than this one. This one's actually a little bit more bumpy than this one. So each pumpkin is a little bit different. Even if you have the same type of pumpkin, you might notice that it's different than a different one. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to be using tools that maybe we're not used to using, or maybe we don't use them for these things, and that's okay. Sometimes we use different things to help us find answers and solve problems. So my first thing I want to see is how tall my pumpkin is. Now I could use a ruler, so I have a ruler if I want to. Another thing I could do, because sometimes we don't have a ruler with us, we can use other objects, and if we write it down and record it, we can later then figure out how big something is. So I'm going to use something that I know most classrooms have. They might look a little bit different than mine. That's okay. So I'm going to be using cubes. So I have these connecting cubes, and there's even different types of cubes. I have these connecting cubes. And what's neat about these ones is that they do really lock in together. And I have two kids, and they like to play with them and build other things with them by putting them sideways and stuff, which I'm sure some of you like to do as well. They are fun. However, these become very useful to actually measure different things and to compare the sizes of different objects. So what I'm going to be doing is figuring out how tall is my pumpkin. So when I'm talking about tall, I'm going to go up and down. So I'm going to start with the bottom because we're on something flat. We always want to start with something flat, just like when we measure yourself. You always want to stand up nice and tall and have your feet flat on the ground, right? So we're going to start with our pumpkin on the table, and I'm going to start putting my cubes. So we can see right now that is definitely not as tall as the pumpkin. So that's just 2 cubes. And what I'm going to do is keep adding cubes until I get to about the height. So that's 3, we're still not close. 4, nope. I'm going to keep adding. You can see my kids built this cube. Add, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, still not. 4. I'm getting closer. However, I want to be able to do my stem as well. So I'm going to add another one. And sometimes this is hard because, as you guys can see, my tower of cubes is over here, my pumpkin stem is over here, and this is as close as I could get it to kind of see if it's the same height. Something I can do, and something you should also notice, my pumpkin stem is crooked, so it goes slanted down. So I'm going to do it to the tallest point. Something we can do, if we have objects like this, is we can get something else that's pretty flat. So I'm going to actually use my little sheet of paper, and I'm going to see, does it go pretty straight? It does. So I'm going to say this is how tall my pumpkin is. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cubes tall. Again, it may not be exactly, it's about 7 cubes. So on my sheet, I'm going to be writing 7. My pumpkin. I am going to get my pencil, and we already measured it, so now we just need to record it. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tall. So I'm going to write a 7 right here. And if you're following along and doing the same thing I am, you're going to go ahead and put your 7 right there. And then we are going to, I'm going to quickly color in my cubes. Guess what? They can be any color you would like. You can decide, are you using crayons, markers, colored pencil? You ask the grown-up in your life if you're not sure what you can use. I'm just going to quickly grab purple crayon and color them quick. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just adding a little detail. So we have my purple, and then I'm gonna grab an orange. Looks pretty close to mine. My pumpkin's a little bit more yellow. That's okay. And you can either, your teacher or the adult you're with can decide, are you gonna color all your stuff now, or maybe you're gonna wait till the end. And that is up to them. Just wanna show you how we wanna be able to color it in. I'm gonna find my brown. So, colored it in. I have my 7 cubes tall and colored in my pumpkin. We're gonna go on to our next step. The next thing that we're gonna do is we measured how tall. We also wanna measure how wide or how big or how far it goes sideways. I'm gonna do the same thing. Again, it's gonna be a little bit weird because you can see, if you notice, if you hold your pumpkin or you hold any pumpkin, it's kind of like a ball. And a ball goes, it's round, which means it's gonna go down at the bottom and it gets a little bit fatter at the top, and then it gets really skinny at the top again, okay? So it's not all the same size around. So I wanna see at the biggest points, at my widest points, how wide is this pumpkin? So one thing you can do is we could either do what we did before where we measured how tall. Another thing you can do is take this sheet of paper, not the side with the words. I'm gonna put the one with the pictures and the words down. And I'm gonna make it so my blank side is up. Now watch what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna get a pencil, normal pencil. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my pencil on the side of my pumpkin where it's really big. I'm just gonna slide it down and I'm gonna make a line, okay? And then I'm gonna do the same thing on this side. So wherever it's the widest, and then we slide it down, straight down, and then make a line, okay? Another thing you can do, if you have someone help you, put your pumpkin on the paper. Lay it flat, and just put out that white spot, put it at the wide spot, just make a quick line. Now, I have a flat area that I can measure my cubes on, okay? So this is an easy way to measure how wide it is. That way, I can not have to worry to make sure my cubes don't wrap around, but I can just measure on my piece of paper. So now we are going to use our paper and measure. Okay, so I showed you how we can record how big our pumpkin is by doing the wide. I make my 2 lines. You can even see my lines aren't even straight. That's okay because I'm going to use my cubes. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just going to go a diagonal then with my cubes. So I'm going to start there. 1. Just flip it so you guys can see. 1. And I'm going to hook these. 2. 3. 4. 5. I'm wondering if it's going to be 7 too. That'd be crazy. 6. 7. So if you see, here's that side. I line it up. I actually still have some space. About a pencil, it's actually about the width of a pencil to that next line. If I were to put another cube, we can see that most of the cube is past that line, which means probably shouldn't have that cube on because that's way bigger than the width of my pumpkin. So I'm going to say it's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, exactly the height of our pumpkin too. So it's about 7 cubes tall. Again, yours it may be wider. I don't think I've actually ever had a pumpkin, but all the years I've done this, that's as tall as it is wide. So I'm going to flip this over because remember, I just used the back of this because I don't need the back. I'm going to be gluing it down. So I'm going to go to my pumpkin is cubes wide. I counted my cubes, double check, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to write 7. It's 7 cubes wide. I'm going to need my cubes for one more thing. We're going to be going to this one. we're gonna do one more measurement with cubes. So we measured how tall something was. We measured how wide it was. These are our normal measurements we do for objects. How tall, how wide. We're also going to do something where it's called the circumference of a pumpkin, meaning how big is it all the way around. So just like our planet Earth, we have our equator. It goes all the way around. It's like a belt on the Earth. It's how big our Earth is around. We're going to do that for a pumpkin. Anything that is round, that is anything like this, so a pumpkin, you could do a beach ball, anything like that, we can actually measure to see how big around. So if we needed to put a belt on this pumpkin and dress it up, how big would my belt need to be? I am going to measure with cubes, but again, we already saw that our cubes don't really wrap around. It would be kind of hard. These cubes, it might be a little easier just because they connect, but these squares, they're very solid squares. They're not going to really want to bend like a pumpkin does. So what we're going to use is we're going to use a string, and we're going to do it very similar to how we did our width of our pumpkin. However, I can't really measure my pumpkin all the way around. It's going to be hard to do. You can do this lots of different ways. I like to use string or yarn or any type of something like this. Some people use a measuring tape that, like, you guys probably have seen it if someone sews, where they can actually wrap it around. You could do that, and then you have the actual measurement. I'm doing it as how I normally am. I don't normally have those types of measuring tape, so I'm going to use a string, and then we're going to measure it, and I'm going to show you how to do that. You could also do it with pieces of paper. You can wrap a big piece of paper around and mark where it ends, up to you. So what we're going to do is, it helps if you have someone to help you. We are going to hold our string down, so I'm going to hold it in the spot. I'm going to go around the biggest part of my pumpkin again, okay? Because we want the widest part. So we can go around, wrap it around. Now we're going to be measuring the circumference. We took our yarn. I just have a string. Again, you can use all different things. I just happen to have this around. Anything works, really. So I took it, I measured it, I cut it. Now I'm going to lay it flat just like I did when I had this. I'm going to be using my cubes to go across and measure how long it is. I'm going to predict that it is definitely longer than 7 cubes. So let's see how long. The same thing, I'm going to make sure that my end of my cube matches the end of my string, because I want to make sure that it lines up and I'm getting the correct measurement. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So here was how tall and how wide it was, just looking at the normal measurements if I were to do it, but looking at it because it is a 3D shape, I'm going all the way around, so I'm doing my circumference. So here's 7, definitely bigger than 7. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, so that is double the 7, so now we're at 14 and we still have some more to go. 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, so that's actually 3 times, so that's 7 plus 7 plus 7. We're still not at the end. 22, 23, and if you look, so I'm going to line it up exactly. I only have just a little bit overhang, so I'm going to say that my pumpkin circumference is 23 cubes long. So you can tell when it's like this, I cannot get these to wrap around. That's not going to wrap around, which is why we can use things such as a yarn, string, thread, something that can move and bend, and we can manipulate or make it go around and then lay it out flat. All right, are we ready to write down? 23. I'm gonna break this so I have more room. So right here where it says my pumpkin circumference is 23, so that's a 2 and a 3 cubes. And you guys can see the arrows are showing to go around your pumpkin just like we did, going around it.
I'm gonna wait to color these two at the end so we can finish up the rest of this.
We've done 3 of our 6 measurements. Now we're gonna do a little bit different measurements. The next few actually don't have our cubes, so we're not gonna need our cubes for these. We are going to need to be able to count. So get ready because sometimes we have to count. Another thing that we're going to use is actually we're going to weigh it. So there are lots of different ways you can weigh it. There are different types of scales. I've done a lot of different kinds. How many of you have ever gone to the grocery store and you've seen the scales and you can put your produce in there, so our fruits and our vegetables, and you see how much it weighs? Usually because we pay for however much they weigh. That's how much money we need to figure out how much we're going to pay for. So I'm going to use a scale. My scale, you can use it for lots of different things. Maybe some of you have these at home and your parents use them when they're cooking. A lot of times people use them to help bake. So my scale, I can press it on and see it has my numbers. And we always want to make sure, no matter what kind of scale you're using, that you start at 0. Because if you start at anything else, then it's not going to show us how much it actually weighs. I'm going to be using pounds and ounces. And so all we're going to do is be taking our pumpkin, we're going to put it on our scale and see how much it weighs. Sometimes it might have more than one number, just like ours does. So when we write it, I'll show you how we're going to write it down to make sure that we have the accurate number.
Are you ready to see how much our pumpkin weighs? So again, I'm going to make sure it's at 0. So I have 0 pounds, 0 ounces. We want to make sure that it's blank. That way I can see how much it weighs. If I have it at a different number, so like if I press down, you guys can see it changes the numbers. I wouldn't want that because it's not going to give me the true measurement. So make sure it's at 0, it's at 0. And what I'm going to do is take my pumpkin, and all we're going to do is place it flat down. And we're going to wait for it to stop moving numbers. And it says we have 2 pounds, 8.5 ounces. It's a pretty good sized pumpkin. So I'm going to move this. We're going to move our scale. And then right here, I told you it can have more than one number. So what we do is we're going to write 2 and then L and a B. And that stands for pounds. And then our next one was 8 and then a period, 5 ounces, or OZ. And mine went past that little period down there, so I'm just going to cross it out. So 2 pounds, 8.5 ounces. If you wanted to just do a close and you want to do just pounds, we could just say it's about 2 pounds. This one's tricky because you could go either 2 pounds or close to 3 pounds. You could do 2.5 pounds, 2.5 pounds. All right, on to our next.
All right, now that we have finished our weighing it, we're going to figure out something that is special and unique about our pumpkin. And each pumpkin is going to be different because they're each very unique and special and depends on how they grow. So we're going to actually be measuring the lines around our pumpkin. How many of these lines are there? Again, different types of pumpkins are going to have different lines. So like this one, you guys can see this has very deep lines and bigger sections. And this pumpkin, it's kind of hard to tell, but it has much closer spaced lines in different sections. Each pumpkin's different. Depends on how long it grows, depends on where it grew, the type. They're all a little bit special. So we're going to be counting how many lines are on our pumpkin, how many sections. I feel like this one is gonna have quite a bit, and we're gonna figure out how we can keep track to do this.
Okay, so up close you guys can see that it does have lines. These ones are harder. I always think it's harder to do these ones up top. We can, it's up to you. Sometimes it depends on the type of pumpkin. Other pumpkins, it's much easier to see your sections or your lines. They get a little bit bigger. And these ones are really, my little lines, the indents, they are indented, meaning that they do go in. It's very hard to tell on sugar pumpkins. So I'm gonna figure out, I'm deciding the best way to do it. Sometimes you can do it on the bottom, it's a little bit easier. I'm not sure today. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do it kind of near the top, and when I hold it like this, I can kind of see it. Not super great, but kind of. I am going to see, sometimes it'll work. I'm going to use a crayon to help me figure it out. So I'm going to count and mark 1, 2, and I'm putting a mark right on the line where it goes in. 3, 4, 5, 6. And this is where my other senses can help me, because if it's hard for me to tell, I can move my hand, and when it goes down, I know that's another line. So that's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 22. Wow, that's a lot of lines. And you can see I got right back to where I started. I like to do that just so I don't lose track. Sometimes I lose track, but that's okay, because then I can just go back and I can keep counting again if I messed up, if I wasn't sure. But we had 22 lines on this pumpkin. 2 and a 2, 22. My very last one that I need to do is my pumpkin smooth or bumpy?
Sure, as you were counting lines, you noticed, or you figured it out, maybe you noticed it when we were first looking at our pumpkins, is my pumpkin smooth or bumpy? So this pumpkin, when I feel it, it's pretty smooth. You can even tell on my pumpkin, it's very shiny. That usually means it's pretty smooth because it has a surface to reflect off of. So my pumpkin's pretty smooth. I've done this before and I've had bumpy pumpkins. So I do have some spots right here that are a little bit bumpy, but not a lot. I have some scratches from where it was growing and when it grew. But overall, and we're gonna just decide what is it most like? I'm gonna say I have a smooth pumpkin. And then once we have finished all that, we've done all our different parts, we are going to put this in our notebook and we are going to get started with our next step of growing the pumpkin.
Guys, you can kind of see from this angle too. It's very shiny. You can kind of see where I told you it's bumpy. Right there, I have really tiny little bumps. Right here, there's some, the brown spots, a little right here. But for the most part, my pumpkin is very smooth. It's very shiny. It's pretty smooth. Doesn't have a lot of lines either, or really big lines. I told you some of these were hard to tell because it didn't really go in. So I'm going to say that my pumpkin is smooth. So I'm going to circle smooth pumpkin and smooth. This is going to be interesting to watch as we grow our pumpkins. Do we think that that's going to change? We'll have to see. So now that I've done all my measurements, if you haven't finished coloring, what we can do is we can finish coloring pretty quick, and then we can go ahead and put this into our lab book. So I'm going to finish coloring. You can do yours how you want. I'm going to do it pretty quick. I'm going to use crayons just because it's very quick. And again, I'm not doing it perfect. I'm going to just do the best I can, try to stay in the lines. Some of these are really tiny to color, so we're just going to do our best. I'm going to do my scale gray and then finish coloring this pumpkin. Things colored in. I decided to outline that in black just so I could see it a little bit better. Colored in my words. Again, I did my best. There might be some spots that we went out of the lines, and that's okay. We're doing our best. Sometimes it's hard to color those little things with our crayons. So my last step that I'm going to do is I'm going to need a glue stick. Let me grab my glue stick. And we are going to be gluing this into our book.
we're gonna glue in our All About My Pumpkin into the inside. So I am going to open up my folder. I still need to put my cover on it with my name. This is my front. I'm gonna open it up just like I would a book. So you're gonna put it in front of you, open it up like it's a book. And then on our left-hand side, so it's the side that if I make an L, it makes an L. So fold it up. What side makes an L when you look at it, capital L? I'm gonna put it on the left-hand side, and then there's a top part and a bottom part. So I'm gonna put one hand up top and one hand down below. The one where my bottom hand is, that's where I'm gonna put this. So what I'm gonna do is make sure that it fits in that side. So on the side where our book is folded, I wanna make sure that's all on one side of the fold. We don't want it to be in the middle, because then it's gonna get all smashed, and we worked really hard on that. So I'm gonna take my glue stick, flip it over. Remember, we had lines on the back, so I said, we're gonna glue it down. So I'm gonna use my glue stick, and I don't need a whole lot of glue to glue this paper down, because guess what? My paper is really light. It's not super heavy. So I like to do just quick circles in the corners. You can even do one in the middle. Don't need to cover the whole thing. And then I'm going to put it down. Remember where my bottom hand was? Press it, rub it, and then it's done. And guess what? We're going to be filling in other parts of this too. So let's go ahead and do our next